All right, let's go ahead and get started. Brad, are you ready? Courtney, you're ready. Everybody? Good afternoon and welcome to the third Regional Goods Movement Stakeholder Meeting. This presentation is of the Regional Goods Movement Plan update for 2023. We appreciate all of you using your time and advice and guidance to the development of this plan and look forward to using it to push the region forward. Today's agenda focuses on three key areas of the Regional Goods Movement Plan: commodity flows, origin destination analysis, and critical urban freight corridors. You'll receive information and hopefully offer rigorous discussion about the updated methodology and data. My name is Veronica Green. I am the H-GAC project manager for the Regional Plan update. I'm supported by Ali Isbell, the H-GAC assistant director. H-GAC has collaborated with HDR to develop this plan. The project manager for HDR is Keith Bucklew, a nationally recognized freight practice leader for HDR. He specializes in the development of freight mobility plans and multimodal freight solutions. HDR's deputy project manager is Reddy Idulakanti. Reddy, the region's institutional resource and asset. Additional expertise has been acquired by our partners Kimberly Horn, the Gunda Corporation, Vesta Ray, WSP, and CJ Hicks. Next slide. The Regional Goods Movement Plan is a long-range plan for the goods movement system in Houston-Galveston area region. The plan is designed to ensure the region can continue to play a critical role in national and international supply chains while meeting regional economic goals, addressing critical mobility challenges, mitigating impacts to the environment, and ensuring equity. This plan is a multi-year effort to collect data, conduct analysis, and engage regional stakeholders covering multiple aspects of the regional goods movement system. Next slide. The Regional Goods Movement Plan has defined its vision as creating a multimodal freight transportation system that is efficient, reliable, and safe, and that supports the economy, the environment, and equity, with goals focused on mobility, safety, infrastructure, economic development, and protecting environmental resources and equity. Next slide. In the previous steering committee, we learned that this study area includes 8 counties and some 1,600 miles over the Texas freight network, 1,000 miles of Class 1 rail, 4 deep water ports, 2 major airports, and over 21,000 miles of pipeline. According to HRE data, 10% of the top 100 bottlenecks in the country are located in our region. In statewide data, 6 of the top 10 most congested truck segments are in the H-GAC region, and roughly 1/3 of the top 100 most congested truck segments are also located in our region. Hello. We discussed over a 3-year period that there were over 14,000 commercial motor vehicle involved crashes between 2019 and 2021, with the most common locations inside of the 610 loop. The data identified 14 locations on the freight network where bridges were designated as poor, 16 locations where bridge drags have occurred. We noted that 86% of the rail crossings in the region are at grade and have created more than 1,400 incidents of block crossings. 17% of the region's freight surface transportation infrastructure has a high vulnerability or a high criticality resiliency score. The region has an unmet truck need of over 1,100 spaces. This information in GIS format can be viewed on the Regional Goods Movement Storyboard, and that is accessible through the Engage webpage. And with that, I'll begin and turn this over to Alan.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're good.
Except that it's afternoon. Okay, good afternoon. I'd like to talk a little bit about commodity flow analysis, which underpins a lot of our work in the freight study. We looked at two major sources for freight movement data. One is a federal source called the Freight Analysis Framework, which some of you may be familiar with. It's a free US DOT product. You can go to their website and see what it is. It gives us tons and value by mode, by commodity, by origin destination for base year 2017 and then forecasts out to 2050. We also have access in this study to Transearch data made available to H-GAC thanks to Texas Department of Transportation. It's like FAF, but it's a commercial product which has a little bit more specificity in terms of origin and destination patterns and in terms of commodity patterns. And it's especially useful for more detailed investigations of trucking. So I'm going to show you a little bit about that data in the next slides. Next, please. So looking specifically at trucking, domestic truck moves inbound to, outbound from, and within the HGC regions comes to about 401 million tons of freight worth $382 billion. Those are really big numbers. Those are big numbers that are larger than many states just on their own. The HGAC region accounts for basically a third of the state's truck tons and about a third of its value. The information from Transearch for trucking aligns real well with Freight Analysis Framework. It's real close numbers. And if we look specifically at what's happening in the HGAC region, how the 401 million tons is broken down, about 132 million tons is inbound, about 95 million tons is outbound, about 172 million tons is moving within the region. So within region, from county to county is the largest share of activity, but there is significant inbound, significant outbound as well. Next slide, please. We're looking at commodity tonnage on the left and commodity value on the right, and there are real interesting differences between the two ways of looking at the data. So the color bars are the direction of flow. Gray is moving within, blue is outbound, orange is inbound. Looking at tonnage, we see that petroleum and coal products are the #1 tonnage commodity, and a lot of that is moving within the region. Non-metallic minerals, things like sands, are moving both within and inbound to the region, followed by chemicals, warehouse and distribution, and rail traffic and air traffic. Truck drayage is the fourth leading tonnage commodity group. And that basically represents a whole mix of commodity types that might end up in a warehouse and then get delivered to you at home or to a business. It's basically high value consumer and business goods of various kinds. If we look at value, warehouse distribution traffic is by far the largest share of value with about $65 billion in movement, and it's all directions, inbound, outbound, and within. Machinery, non-electrical machinery, high value industrial goods is the second leading commodity group, followed by petroleum and coal products, chemicals, transportation equipment, things like automobiles and trucks, and metal products, then food products are the remaining leading tonnage commodities by truck. Next. Origins and destinations of these moves. If we're looking at inbound trucks, stuff coming into the HGAC region, about 60% of it originates in the remainder of Texas, about 10% in Louisiana, and the rest of it is spread throughout the US, Canada, and Mexico. So really the HGAC's largest trading partner besides itself is the remainder of Texas. And looking on the right at the destinations for that traffic, about 70% of what arrives inbound to the HGAC region is coming into Harris County. Other counties ranging between 1% and 8% of traffic. Next. Looking at the outbound trucks, it's a pretty similar picture with a little more diversity. Texas is remainder of Texas is still the leading trade partner with about 60% of the outbound trucks. Louisiana at about 14%, California at 5%, and the remainder spread throughout the country. And similar to inbound, Harris County accounts for the largest share of outbound trucks. Next. And then if we look at trade within the HGAC region, which is the largest single component of flows for the region, about 67% begins in Harris County, and 68% ends in Harris County, with contributions with the other counties ranging from small numbers up to about 11 or 12%. So it's a diversity of activity that some counties are significantly affected by these flows and others less so. Next. Where are we going? If we look at 2019 and 2050, what we're seeing is the forecast calls for tonnage to more than double, from 400 million tons to 885 million tons over the course of the next 30 years, and value to nearly triple from $382 billion in trade to over $1 trillion in trade just for the H-GAC region alone. This is trade that'll occur in all directions, and it gives us some benchmarks to think about as we're planning for the future. And that's the commodity flow analysis that we're working with. Thank you.
Okay, I think this is where I pick it up. I'm Keith Bucklew with HDR. I'm the project manager working with H-GAC. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah. Keith,
Okay.
you want to take a moment to take any questions? You can add any questions to the chat box or use the raise hand feature and we can acknowledge your questions. Any in the audience?
Actually, I have a question. My name is Luis Aviles. I'm with the Houston Airport. And one question that we recently got is whether there's some trucking that is originating in Mexico coming through the maquiladoras. I mean, from the Mexican maquiladoras going to the airport to be flown out to destinations around the world. So I know it's a difficult analysis, but not sure. I mean, it was very nice to see that that inbound, outbound share by even by Mexican states. So we're trying to find out whether there's cargo coming in by truck, and then from Mexico, and then flown out from the airport.
Yeah.
Okay, I think some of that will be answered in the next part of our presentation.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, this is David Abraham from HECTRA. And I have two questions. First question is, what do you guys already have some kind of, I don't know, data sharing protocol that you've set up with partners like ourselves? I guess the point of the question is, are we able to access this data? First question.
Yeah, so yes, you are actually able to access this data. We have a portal that's available through our Engage platform, which I'll drop in the chat shortly, and you're
Awesome.
able to access any of this data any of the data that you'll see presented here today on the variety of dashboards that we've created to be public facing.
Yeah, so I was wondering about the actual data, so that we could we have our transportation. We have your model that you've developed in-house here at HECTRA, and so I was wondering about things, the state data that you were able to access, whether we could pull that into our model as well.
The freight analysis framework data you can download and work from the dashboard that Veronica mentioned. You can actually right click on it and pull the entire data set down. The Transearch data is commercially restricted, and it's licensed. So the arrangement for sharing was through Texas Department of Transportation. So the availability and coverage of that sharing agreement would be something that's probably best pursued with Texas DOT.
With them, okay. And thank you so much for that. And the second question is a question around the Port of Houston region. I know in the presentation that you gave us charts, but we would like to take a look at that region and help to kind of work that big plan to do more dredging and expand the port for more freight. We would like to understand how best to supplement that. So I don't know at what levels. I'm assuming that at all levels within H-GAC and regional planning that everyone will be focused on that. So how are you guys integrating that thus far into the work you're doing?
H-GAC recently, last year completed the ports area mobility study where we took a deeper dive into freight mobility around the ports region. We were able to look at freight movements, and there were several recommendations on how H-GAC and the region can better support the 4 major deep water ports within our region. So that information can be found in the ports area mobility study. In terms of this study, it's a bit of what we're collecting here, but we're definitely looking at it from a more regional perspective, or larger regional perspective, but we do understand that the ports are our economic engine.
Yeah, no, of course, but you know, in my thank you for that. In my conversations with them, it looks like they are looking to this group. They're looking to H-GAC for the transportation planning and the freight planning. So in other words, you know, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, right? So I just was wondering, you know, if there was an opportunity here for us to do something concurrent, or whether you guys felt comfortable that the expansion plans are already integrated into this effort.
I can tell you,
you understand the question?
I can tell you we have Bruce Mann in the room, and he can kind of speak to the collaborative efforts that we have with H-GAC and some of the other regional partners.
Okay. Thank you, and that's it.
We've been working alongside each other for a while now. So I think one of the things that's probably changed is, you know, we did the port study a year ago, and it's already out of date, right? Our container volume's up 35% in the last 2 years, and there was no way we were forecasting that when we did the study. So I think we just need to continue to work together, share information and forecasts, and because when you talk about the volume nearly doubling between now and 2040 or 50, well, we're already at 35% in 2 years. So we just need to continue to work together as a region as things change, kind of have conversations.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any? Hi, Mr. Taylor, go ahead. We maybe have a little bit of audio issue with Mr. Taylor. Okay, let's move forward.
There's another hand up that I see, Charles.
Yes. Good afternoon, Veronica or Keith. Do we have when you're looking at the truck's origin destination, did you look at truck parking facilities in the region? And if not, did you coordinate that with the TXDOT study that is going on truck parking?
Yes, we've looked at truck parking, and yes, it's been coordinated with TXDOT. And, you know, from our initial assessment, there's a need of about 1,100 to 1,200 truck parking spaces in the area right now, just to accommodate the unmet demand. But yes, it is included in this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, if we don't have any other hands up, I can go ahead and talk about the origin destination truck moves if we're ready for that. Sounds like we are. So I will go ahead to provide some background information before we go in and talk about the actual movements. Our data source is a trucking probe data type of source from INRIX. That's the company. And by trucking probe, it's satellite communication pings that actually record the location of trucks as they're moving in the area. And we used different portions of data from some 3-month periods in 2019 and 2020 that you see on the slide there. Those are representative samples. We focused on medium and heavy trucks. Those are above 14,000 pounds and above. And as already been stated, most of the truck moves are within the H-GAC region, and those that are not, most of those are in Texas, but we did look at the surrounding states to show where the trucks were going. And for the rest of the analysis, we break these down into what is called TAZS. They are a traffic analysis zone, and this analysis zone is very small. Sometimes no more than a 1/4 mile by a 1/2 mile in size or so on. And these are built into H-GAC's travel demand model. And there's well over 5,200 of these. So we can get down to some pretty fine granularity on locations. So when you see that TAZ, you know we're talking about a pretty small geographical area as we looked at the information going forward. So let's go to the next slide. We're going to show you the data dashboard. We're going to click on this in just a minute and show you a demonstration. It'll be about 3 minutes, and this is a Tableau-based platform. I'm not, that versed in Tableau, some of you may be, but you can click on it and it's fairly easy to use. So let's show the demonstration.
Hi, this is a live demonstration video showing a dashboard that can assist in understanding truck movement to, from, and within the H-GAC 8-county region. The dashboard has 3 parts. The top left corner shows pull-down selection options and the color legend. A map on the bottom left corner allows for selection of interested areas, and the map on the right side of the screen shows the truck trip distribution for the selections made on the left side. Among the pull-down options, the first option allows the user to choose either a street map or aerial background. The second option allows for selection of trips within the H-GAC series. The second option allows for the selection of trips within the H-GAC area, outside of the area, or both. The third option allows for selection of trip direction: inflow, outflow, within, or all trips. Inflow represents trips coming into the selected area. Outflow represents trips leaving the selected area. The fourth pull-down option lists traffic analysis zones by number located within the H-GAC 8-county region. These zones are used for segmentation of the larger H-GAC metro area into smaller segments for detailed analysis. Map number 1 in the lower left corner shows TAZs in different shades of blue. Darker blue represents a TAZ generating more truck trips. Let's zoom into this map and select one TAZ. The map on the right is now showing the distribution of trips for the selected TAZ with colored circles in various sizes. We'll need to zoom in to understand the information. Let's go to pull down option 4, deselect all, and type in 1312. The map on the right side refreshes and shows the trips generated by TAZ 1312. Larger and darker circles represent a higher number of trips. If you zoom in and hover over a specific circle, the TAZ ID, number of trips, and percentage of trips appear in an info box. This information can be downloaded by clicking the download button above map 2. If you go over to the third pull down option, you can see that we're looking at the combination of all trips right now. Let's deselect all and look at inflow. Inflow represents trips coming into the selected area. For TAZS 1312, when we select Inflow, the largest and darkest dot is TAZS 1342. This means this TAZS is responsible for the highest number of trips going into TAZS 1312. Let's look at Outflow. For TAZS 1312, the largest number of trips going from TAZS 1312 is to TAZS 1265. You can tell because this is the largest and darkest circle. This tool can be used to track truck trips within the H-GAC 8-county region, and the data can be graphically represented. The source data for this tool is truck trip data from the spring and fall seasons of 2019 and 2020. Thank you for your attention. For more information, contact Veronica Green at H-GAC.
Okay, let's go to the next slide, and we're going to show you some examples. This may make it a little more clear. And we're going to focus initially on the Barbour's Cut, and we're looking at truck traffic inflows. And in this example, you can see the larger map on the left. You know where the Barbour's Cut area is. And so truck flows coming into Barbour's Cut, you can see we've annotated the 5 largest on the right. And for example, TAZS number 2664 is right near LaPorte. And so it's almost on top of a Barbour's Cut. So it's a truck movement that's a very short distance. The second highest coming into the Barbour's Cut area comes from the Bayport terminal area. Again, a very short move relatively. And then another one, the third largest is, this is showing TAZS 4554, but if you look on the map, that's up State Route 146, right at the edge of Chambers County. And there's a few others there. So you can see where the inbound truck movements are coming. Let's go to the next slide. And we'll look at the inbound flows coming into, let me look here, at TAZS 2664, which is LaPorte. Where are the truck movements coming into? Well, the largest number is coming from the Barbour's Cut terminal. Again, a very short distance. The second highest, Jacina, the Jack and Two, I don't know if I'm even pronouncing that right. Care Terminal, which is off to the west, but is located once again along the Port of Houston area. And then you can see the other 3 largest locations from which trucks are moving into the Freeport area. We'll do one more example on the next slide. And this is coming into the Bayport terminal. As you can see, Bayport's about halfway between LaPorte and Seabrook. And where are the trucks coming from? The largest source is coming in right next to it. You can see some of the major shippers that we listed, but the TAZS number is 2694, but it's located right on the south edge of the Bayport terminal, just immediately south towards Seabrook. And you can see some of the large shippers there that are responsible for those truck movements. The second highest is this TAZS 2691, immediately west of that, but also very close. And then the third highest coming from the Barbour's Cut. So this truck probe data matches very closely with the FAF and the Transearch data that Alan talked about, in which H-GAC is its own largest trading partner. So let's go to the next slide. Now we're going to show some outbound flows, starting with Barbour's Cut. And you can see where, with Barbour's Cut being the origin location where truck trips are going. The first one being it's showing TAZS number 2664, which is right next to the Barbour's Cut terminal. and the largest client in there being Frontier Logistics. The second highest of truck movements going to the Bayport terminal, and then you can see the other three listed there. Once again, they're all staying fairly close on the east side of Houston, in the general port area. And I should point out that, as you can see, the little bottom pie chart of all the truck movements, outflow going out of Barbour's Cut, 75% of those trucks are within the H-GAC region, and only 25% go outside of H-GAC. And out of that 25, the largest majority of that 25% stays within Texas. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So, of all the truck origin and destination movements that either are coming into the Port of Houston or that are going out of the Port of Houston, this is the 25 top locations of those truck movements. And as you can see, the bulk of them are staying in the general area of the port. One of the largest one up to the northeast, I'm thinking that's showing as TAZS number 2533, but that's Mount Bellevue. Okay, that's as far north of the top 25 it's going, and you can see down to the south, to the Seabrook area on that TAZS number 2694, and then out to the west toward the Galena Park area and other locations. So that's the top 25 of all the truck movements in and out of the port. So it's a pretty tight shot group. That's what we're trying to show you. Let's go to the next slide, and we're going to expand the geography just a bit. So now, looking at the whole region, the whole H-GAC region, these are the top 25 truck locations collectively, both inbound and outbound, into these 25 locations. So the shot group is a little bit wider, okay? Still out to Mount Bellevue in the northeast and down to the Seabrook area in the south, but you can see out to the west, it goes out towards Katy and then up to the northwest of the airport. So it's a little bit further out, but once again, the top 25 all stays really within almost Harris County, but some into Chambers County. So just to give you a perspective where these trucks are coming and going, they're all pretty local. Okay, with that, let's go to the next slide. And we're going to shift topics just a little bit. We're going to talk about critical urban freight corridors. And I think I need to stop here because we need to give some instructions on how to get into the Mentimeter, because we've got some Q&A that we're going to initiate.
Keith, we actually have a question in.
Okay, I didn't see a hand, but is it chat box? Oh,
It's in the room.
okay. Okay.
So
Oh, okay.
If I go back to the previous slide, the top 25,
Yes, sir.
have you guys looked at what that will be like in 2050? Have you tried to forecast that? Because I think that you're going to see some shifts between now and then. I think it's important that we capture what
Yes.
it is now and what it's going to be.
Yes. And that's a really good observation. We're already seeing out toward Katy increasing in truck traffic out to that west side. And we're seeing more up into the Chambers County area. So yes, you are absolutely correct. It is, it's like the expanding universe. It's going out a little further because, as different businesses open up, they're not able to be right in and around the port. They're out where trucks have mobility and are able to reach other markets quicker. But yes, good observation.
To answer your question, this data set is Cambridge data set, which is all the existing trucks that are out there, from 2019 and 2020. So this is all existing information. We don't have a forecast for 2050 where truck movements will be. I mean, the transfer what it does is it forecasts the growth, right? That's different, but correlation between what that forecast from 2050 commodity flows translates to a truck movement. But we do have, from the course area moving study, I don't know if you recall, we developed a spreadsheet tool which basically converts all the commodity flows into actual truck trips, and we call it truck trip calculator. So there is that tool available still. The HGAC, if you want to use that to come up with that, but there is this data set and that's what I'm looking at.
No, and the reason I bring it up is because, you know, between now and 2050 or whatever it is, basically the population is going to almost double, right? All of that growth is east of I-35, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, Houston. So you're going to see a growth in shipments from the container terminals to Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, and warehousing distribution along the east side, along the west side. So, you know, there's going to be some significant growth in those areas. And we need to have some sort of forecast so we can kind of look forward and say, here's corridors that we need to invest in.
Yeah, so I guess we have the forecast and we know that how much the freight will increase by, that's a tonnage and all that. But how do we convert that into trips and estimate, okay, how many will go from I-69 to 5.5, like that. That's really, you know, it comes down to the land use and how things are distributed across Houston. There's another part of the story, but yeah, it's almost like a crystal ball, right? How would you know where this stuff will go? We at this point we know what the original destinations are today, and we can assume that it would more or less stay the same or kind of you know, grow in the same areas where it's growing right now, because you know, obviously trade comes in. So yeah, we can look into that direction.
Yeah, no, because I think if there's an opportunity to try to get, what is this, June? If there's an opportunity to get another third set of data and look and see the change from 19, 20, 21, then I think that helps you forecast where the growth is headed.
Yeah, yeah. And I can share the later, but if you look at the index data set today, I mean, it's spread all over the city, and you could really tell the difference between how much, what the number of trips, you know, might change like a few hundred trips, but it's really hard to say. But if you look at multiple years, say from 2019, it's a 4 years of data, you might be able to see something. But yeah, we do have the tool. It's basically switching the data, another data set, you know, we just back. Now we can see the difference. So we have some basis now.
Okay. So Veronica, who's going to is somebody going to explain the Menti by using the QR code?
Yes, Courtney's going to go over some brief instructions on how to use the Menti poll, which a lot of us have used, but if in case we just want to make sure.
Right.
So there are two ways that you can access the survey. The first one would be to go to the website www.menti.com that's shown on the screen. Once you go there, it'll ask you to enter the code, which is shown below. The other way is if you use your phone, you can use your camera and hover over the QR code, and then the menti.com link will appear on your phone and you can click it. You can take the survey from your phone instead. So either way works. If everyone wanted to go ahead and do that now, it's not time to take the survey yet, but this way you can go ahead and have it open when it comes time to take the survey, which will be coming up in just a few slides. We'll go ahead and leave the slide up for just another minute or so everyone can access the code and access the QR code either one.
Okay, next slide, let's continue.
Okay. So Five years ago, H-GAC went through the process of designating the critical urban freight corridors, and this is a requirement from the previous reauthorization bill that's been continued with the new reauthorization bill, in which MPOs can designate critical urban freight corridors. And the value of a critical urban freight corridor is that if you have a project that you want developed on that particular corridor segment, then this allows you to get more favorable funding, or it puts you in a more favorable position for funding. That's the value of it. If you have a urban freight corridor, but you do not have projects planned, then there's no value to have that designation. So 5 years ago, there were a total of 36 corridors, which added up to almost 91 miles. And that was the maximum number of mileage that TxDOT allocated to H-GAC, because Texas as a whole is only allowed 372 miles total, and that must be divided up among 25 MPOs. So again, no mileage has been added, so we're going through the process, the analysis now. But previously, 30 of those projects added up to almost 70 miles out of the almost 91 miles. And those have already been constructed or currently are under construction. So this is a good news story. Those received favorable funding, and they were taken into implementation, which is the whole purpose of that designation. The ones that have not been are being moved forward and are being considered on the new list that we're currently developing, and they'll be scored as such. So that's an update on what's happened in the last 5 years. So let's go to the next slide. And this is the criteria that's established in the federal legislation under the new reauthorization bill. First off, it has to be a connector of some sort that connects to an intermodal facility, to the primary highway freight system, the interstate system, or an intermodal facility. Second, it's within a corridor on a route on the primary highway freight system, and provides an alternate highway option. It serves to support a major freight generator, which could be manufacturing, could be mining, it could be distribution, any one a number of type of industries that supports freight movement, but it's a freight generator, a logistics center, and so on. And then the fourth criteria is a little bit subjective. It allows each MPO then to determine what's important. And so if we go to the next slide, this is the H-GAC methodology that derives from that previous 0.4. So H-GAC wants to prioritize projects identified, well, first off, projects that are already under construction or going to begin within 4 years. There's not a need to have them designated because they're already funded and are being planned and are already under construction. So they've already gone through all the gates. They're there, they're in implementation. So on number 2, added capacity with the intent that it's going to alleviate congestion and improve mobility is one of the top criteria that H-GAC has set to be freight eligible for critical urban freight corridor designation, and then identify those projects on there that can be built within the next 5 years, because this is a process that the MPO goes through every 5 years. So if the project is 8 to 10 years out, then it does not need to be on this list. It needs to be on the next list in 2027. So only those that have projects in the next 5 years. And then number 4, eligible projects recommended that are left over from the previous list are being evaluated and added. Projects recommended by stakeholders, such as yourself. And then these are the criteria on a particular route that is vulnerable, i.e. in a floodplain, that a project has been designated for either in the UTP or the TIP list. Then we've looked at truck volumes, and it's truck volumes and truck percentages, because that means it's a freight corridor. We've also looked at heavy truck corridors, those that transport overweight type cargo. A lot of those come out of the ports. Those that connect to that are a critical urban freight corridor connector to one of the main freight generators. And then safety has recently been added as a key criteria for selection as an urban freight corridor. And we use truck crash information to find out which ones have the biggest impact on safety. So that's the criteria. I guess I could stop there and entertain comments, questions, clarifications. Okay. Not seeing, oh, Corey.
So just one note, and I think we mentioned, Chambers County mentioned this in one of the previous summer presentations. We think that possibly, I think maybe 2558, which I think is an Exxon outgoing TAZ, that might be isolated with Baytown, but if it's plastics, it should go to Mont Belvieu, which would be further up 146. So just
right.
No.
Yeah, we were looking at that. TAZ 2558, I think, is the one that previously was mentioned. It's located near Pasadena, right? Along that 225 route. And then somebody was mentioned, they thought that a facility might be confused for the one at Mount Belvieu. Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to go to using the Mentimeter.
1 moment.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
So, we got to cut the miles in half, if I remember correctly, right? So, have you guys put any weighting on these criteria today, or are you just saying these are the 6 or 7 things?
That's question number 3 on the survey.
Yeah.
Next couple of slides.
All right, because I think if I go backwards, I'm gonna talk about your old ones, Barbour. When Harvey happened, one of the first questions Judge Emmett asked was, how do we get the port back up? Because it's critical for our region. Half of the 8-county region economy comes into and out of the port. 27% of the state's economy is the Bay Area. So, if we're putting weighting on, we need to understand the critical nature of the port itself, and the vulnerability of all of those roads, the resilience of those roads, and the freight flow into and out of those regions. Because a freight road, I'm going to pick on this one on the map. What was it? Gessner Drive between Briar Forest and Westheimer is probably not as important as 225. So, as we start contemplating how should we weight this and prioritize these, we need to broadly think about what's important to the region and what's critical that we invest in, and make sure that it's resilient in order to protect the cash cow that we have.
Yes. So, yeah, you're absolutely right, Bruce. And if you, in the next couple of slides, we have the criteria that's up, and we also have the scoring that we used. And we looked at HAC's criticality vulnerability index, which is basically a combination of all the resiliency information, flood information, and also the criticality corridors, which are 225 is a critical corridor compared to this one. So we have that information. And we are also asking stakeholders today, and also in the last couple of meetings, what do you think is a critical criteria? It could be safety for someone, it could be truck volumes for somebody else. So that's what the first question is asking. Just be getting feedback on that.
So the survey is pulled up. Before I explain everything, does anyone need me to go back to the slide to give them the QR code or the TAZS code to get into the survey?
Or you could go to menti.com and put in that code that you see on the screen. 495.
Yes, up at the top, yes. So the first question is asking you to prioritize the criteria that Keith just went over in the PowerPoint. This criteria is used to designate the CUFC. There are 7 options. 1 through 6 are the criteria that Keith went over. The 7th option is other. And on the next slide, you're going to be asked to enter other. So if you do have something in mind that you want to rate pretty high, go ahead and select other, and we'll give you an option on the next slide to enter that in, so you can let us know what that is.
And we'll hold for a few minutes to see how many responses that we can get. See if we get a pretty good idea of where and what everybody is thinking.
Oh, absolutely. There's only 7 people that have answered, and we've got 33 on the line. So I'm expecting participation.
Thank you for calling Medical Clinic of Houston. Please note our extension number. Thank you for calling Medical Clinic of Houston. Please note our extension numbers have changed.
Probably leave it up for about 1 more minute, just so we don't waste a ton of time. Okay, so we will leave it there. I'll go ahead and leave this survey up as well. So if there's anyone that isn't able to take it now, but wants to take it later, that's certainly fine. And so I will leave it active for another day or so, or at least until the end of the day today. So for the next slide, for anyone that did prioritize other, or anyone that had another criteria that they would like to see as a priority, this would be your chance to submit that response.
Future growth, the first one out of the game. Road condition. Economic development.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have basically 3 answers that came out, which kind of matched what was on the previous slide. There was not a lot of others, but future growth, road condition, and economic development seem to be key things that we should consider in terms of adding it into our criteria. And we'll make a note of that, and it'll be a part of the overall study. Next slide.
Yeah. I think it's time to go back to the presentation now. Keith, if you want to go over this before we
Yes,
survey back up.
yes. In our analysis of the critical urban freight corridors, we set up a scoring criteria. Looking at the factors, you see those on the left, the criticality, vulnerability factor, truck volumes, truck percentages, heavy truck corridors, those criteria. And then we assigned points as you see them across the top. So a truck volume that is right at 750, that total would receive, 0.75 of a point. Those that are over 2,000, it goes up to 2 points. Just as an example, it's a matrix and we assign points. And so we're showing you all this to see, to get your feedback on it for one thing. This allows us to add, some objectivity to the process. So let's go to the next slide. And I think we had, okay, there we go. The next question.
So based on the chart that Keith just went over, the current survey question showing is asking if you feel like the criteria is appropriately weighted. This is just a yes or no question. The next slide in the survey will allow you to enter in, if you answered no, why you think that it isn't and what you would like to see changed.
Let me just make sure I understand this correctly. So if I have over 2,000 trucks going down I-10, as a percentage, it's very small. As a volume, it's very big. That's worth, I don't know, 2.25 points versus a road that's 500 trucks, 20%. That's 2.75%. Right?
Yes, it allows us to compare what would be a critical corridor that's more likely a connector versus an interstate. An interstate, we fully expect it to be 10 to up to 15% of truck traffic. And so those would not be specifically included as a critical urban freight corridor. But if there were 2,000, if there were 20% of truck traffic on a connector road, but it's only 500 trucks, it's still a major connector between a critical path between the primary freight system and a freight generator.
Because the way I look at this, is the road, so I'm taking trucks from Mount Bell to Bayport, 300 trucks a day. It's a high percentage of low volume, it's 2.5 compared to I-10, which is maybe 2.25. Is that enough of a, in this one criteria, is that enough of, to really separate those two, give the proper weight to one road versus another?
I believe in the sense that we're not talking specifically about interstate, that we're talking about major arterials, local arterials, then that's the appropriate weighting, because we're not looking at what interstate volumes would look like.
So there's probably no, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, with the exception of probably Barbour's Cut Boulevard and Court Road, there's probably not a road that has over 2,000 trucks a day.
I actually, when I looked at that freight study, I don't know if it was the one that was, no, obviously it wasn't the one that was done last year. The previous one, I think they listed out maybe 20 to 30. They did a scan for stakeholders in the area, and I'm assuming that they also interviewed port execs and business owners, and they did a listing of major thoroughfares. So we know what those roads are based on a previous study.
So Bruce, to go back to your original question, so if you look at only the truck volumes, you might be weighing in some roadways more than others. If we only look at truck percentages, that might be right. So basically, we try to use both and see where would the fall, and scoring. If it's, yeah, basically discounting one.
Yeah.
Okay, I think Judge Emmett has his hand up.
This is a really picky point, but on the far left where it says truck volumes greater than 250, probably ought to be less than 250.
Yeah, we should have 0. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good point. Yep.
The other thing we added to this list recently after last week's state meeting is safety. We have looked at all the crash data. We have a crash rate of these projects. Right now, we are in the process of deciding to post the crash rates to see where they land. But that's a new criteria that's not on the slide.
Mr. Abram?
Yes, I'm sorry. Was there a question?
Oh, you're unmuted.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, I was just trying to do a quick search on best practices on volumes to be able to differentiate between truck traffic and local traffic. I don't think it should be. The judge is right in that the thing is turned the wrong way, but I think we need to add another category, which will differentiate then between traffics that might be traveling at a lower volume on major thoroughfares, and to differentiate again between what are those major thoroughfares and what are the highways. So we need another range in there under the 250 and before we get to the 0.
Okay.
Not really sure what that is. That's why I'm looking. I'm doing a quick search here to see if I can find something. Unless you guys already know what that could be or should be according to best practices.
Well, it's noted, and we'll make sure that we consider those things.
Yes.
So for safety, you have areas that are emerging, like Chambers County, for example. So, they're, from a safety perspective, they're going to be competing against an area that has traffic history, right? So they're going to show no safety incidents versus an area that has a history. So they're going to kind of be unfairly disadvantaged because it's an emerging location. I think somehow we want to be able to account for that.
That's why we're looking at crash rate, not just the number of crashes.
Yeah,
So the
not
crash
even a
rate,
crash rate. I mean, if it's an emerging area,
basically it's the number of crashes versus the volume on the roadway and the number of days. So we have, I mean, that's so that's and again, that's another one criteria of 6 criteria. So hopefully there is a reason for a project to be utilized. The other 5 criteria should be.
Okay, there's another hand up, Bill.
Yeah, it would seem to me that your criteria is pretty basic. I mean, if I don't even have 1 through 2, I just take the number of trucks. I have 2,000 trucks. I can just normalize it. So to me, the criteria doesn't lean one way or the other. And I almost think there should be a denominator of some sort as far as capacity of the road. So if I'm shoving 2,000 trucks on a 4-lane road compared to a 2-lane road, what is, where is my priority? And so I almost think capacity has to be figured into this, because otherwise it's just like, this criteria is like, hey, I got 2,000 trucks. Well, that's a 2. I got 1,000, that's a 1. That's 1 to 1. That doesn't mean anything. But if I have 2,000 trucks on a small road or a smaller road, then I'm going to give that a higher value. That's my comment.
Okay.
I feel like that's a good segue to our next.
well, and then to this point, that's part of the safety narrative too, right? Because if you're running 2,000 trucks over a 2-lane road versus a 4-lane road, while there may not have been incidents, there's definitely a safety factor and component to that. I think the Grand Parkway H&I and TxDOT just built, right? That's a good example of where you're gonna see a lot of truck traffic, but there may not be an incident as yet. But in a narrative, you're gonna catch that. I think if we're gonna have a safety component, it's important to have a narrative tied to it, not just a crash.
Okay, there's another hand up.
This is Hugh McCully. Can I say one thing?
Yes, sir.
And I have to, I'm going to try to say this politely, but I fully recognize that you're trying to have, some quantitative input here on these standards, and I fully understand that you're required basically by the rules to go through this exercise and developing your the way you're going to prioritize. But I don't think, frankly, that everybody gets an equal vote. We've got some people on the call who are very knowledgeable. We've got some people on the call who have less broad experience, let's put it that way. So I just think it's important that while we're trying to have a quantitative and specific discussion here to support your final decisions on how you're going to prioritize, I think it's important for you to pay a lot of attention to some of the people who represent the port interest, the maritime interest, the long-term county's interest, the large manufacturers like Exxon, people who have large fleets. These people, frankly, I think should have a higher vote. And maybe we don't really need a vote. We need a sense of discuss. This is a good discussion to have among all these different people. But I've become a little leery about having 30 people on the call and then having a vote where you're going to come out and say, well, 15 people said this, or 15. I think it's better to get just a sense of what these stakeholders feel, and then rely on your professional judgment of H-GAC and your consultants to go forward with these criteria. That's my comment.
Noted.
So we have 2 survey responses. It's been up for a little bit. Does anyone have anything else to add? If not, we will go back to the presentation. Okay. All right. Keith?
Okay, so we'll continue the discussion. On the left is a map portrayal of the critical urban freight corridors from 2017, and the ones in green are being moved over into the current list because they've not been developed. And then on the right, you can see where we're at currently with looking at potential urban freight corridors here for the 2022 list. And we can provide more information if you need to understand where these locations are. And here's an example of the scoring, and I know we've had that discussion, but a particular project, and this is not a project, by the way, that's being considered. This is just a made-up example. This north-south corridor, it's supposed to, we're saying it's to be widened, double the capacity from 2 to 4 lanes, but on the criticality, vulnerability, it's a moderate, so it gets a 1/4 point there. Truck volumes are right at 2,000 roughly, so it gets 2 points. The percentage, 82%, gets 2 points. It's on a heavy haul route. It gets a point there. It connects to an intermodal facility. And so totaling up at 7.25, which gives us an objective, score of that from which to compare. So that's a real quick example for how the scoring matrix is applied to the projects. And so what are we doing here? Okay, for persons in, okay, we've got the survey card. So I think we're going to take about a 15, maybe 20-minute break. We've got people in person in the room. I know there's display boards up that show that map. And then for online attendees, you can click on the link and get a better view of the map. And so we'll take, 15, 20 minutes. Veronica or whoever's going to kind of be the keeper of the clock and allow people to spend some time looking at that map and formulating some thoughts, and then we will get back together.
Is there a definition somewhere of criticality of vulnerability?
It should be on the HGAC's website. That it's published on as a data set or we just monitor data set.
Because if this is part of the resilience study.
The
I
survey
have
is also
huge
available.
issues with that resilience study because it didn't really get.
They looked at the but they look at all these corridors which are 15 for movement of brain. But they also look at
actually go in and see
corridors and the matrix. Say, agent categories or categories say, okay, there's a high physical. We need to assign it from actual score. Depending on if it's in touch of extent of this study being fine.
They cannot directly comment on the map. They should do it in they should do it in some.
Yeah, so that resilience study as an
I'm worried
example,
if they know that they can
did
be
show
connected.
225 is critical. And that's what I, so if we're using that to judge critical urban freight corridors,
yeah,
we're using the wrong methodology because as a group, we're saying the port's critical, but the resilience study didn't necessarily show that those roads work.
One of the things we were doing in our analysis is we were looking at all the floodplains and looking at the roadways within them. And if the floodplains expanded, then we could see also how that might make it more critical in terms of resilience. So there's multiple, I think we haven't gotten there. That's part of the analysis that we're still conducting, but we are looking at different ways to judge resilience and the impact of the location of a roadway. But I think we're still doing our analysis on that.
Yeah. But I guess, if you think the scoring with the meetings and everything is not appropriate, you can come up with something that makes sense. But at this point, what we're doing is just doing a quantitative analysis, which allows us to figure out the major projects and important projects. How do we rank them? I mean, that obviously, our goal is to send out a list of projects or map that shows, hey, here's your first cut. What do you all think? Do you agree? Replace this one with this one because it's wanted for other reasons. You can always do that. This is just methodology, and this is our first.
Right. No, I get it. I just want to make sure we're not missing anything. Because as an example, the resilience study that we're referencing, segments H and I weren't built at that point. So they're not going to have any weighting from that perspective. So somehow we need to force rank that in there because 1405 and Grand Parkway and 146 in Chambers County are significant.
Yeah. So we do recognize that. Absolutely. It's probably so far from what I know from the analysis, it's probably right in the top 5.
Yeah.
So to make a quick announcement, Veronica posted the link to the map that is showing on the screen. So if anyone wants to access the link through the chat box in Zoom, they're able to. And then if you have any comments, if you'd like to see a corridor that maybe is not listed, you can go to the survey and you can enter up to 3 corridors that you would like to see added to the draft map.
Judge Ed Emmett noted that the underlining map should be updated to show the completed Grant Parkway.
I think one thing, and we can't do it now, but one thing that would have been helpful is if you could have overlaid the top 25 TAZs with this.
Yeah.
Because some of them are going to match up, but some of them aren't.
I
think
think
that would help in that process. Yeah.
okay.
Just that way, just as a note, State Highway 225, you guys show 110,000 total vehicles and truck volume to 16 and some change. I'm thinking that's probably understated. I don't know where the number came from, but
That's based on 2019 counts.
yeah, that's, yeah, so you're gonna be off because that's COVID, right? So.
It would have been a pre-COVID count. It would have been a pre-COVID count for 2019.
Somehow that's off.
But yeah. Okay, so this next question says, let's list up 3 corridors that you would like to see added to the draft critical urban freight corridors map. So is there something that's listed here that you haven't seen before? You received the map, you received the listing as part of the agenda for this meeting, as well as you have the map that's available to you right now. Is there something that is not on this map that we haven't seen or we haven't talked about? Ron Beeson, did you have a comment?
I didn't. Thank you.
Veronica, it looks like Bill Deal has had his hand up for a while.
I think he's already said his piece. Mr. Deal, did you have another comment?
No, I just don't know how to pull down my hand.
Somebody should give him a tickle, while he's up there.
We'll give it just a few more minutes and allow everyone to play with the map and come back with any, and then we'll move on. We don't want to overstay our welcome, but we haven't gotten any new suggestions outside of the 225, the 1405, and one other during this period. But if there's something that we can identify as critical from that the data may not have necessarily identified, that would be helpful. Go ahead, Judge Emmett.
Yeah, while people are thinking about what to add, can I ask what is the corridor in the far northeast corner of Harris County? You see, Bruce has gotten up to go look at it.
FM 2100 between Grant Parkway and Huffman Cleveland Road.
Okay. Do any trucks go on that?
That's what I was just wondering.
One of the criteria that we also put on here, it likely has a higher percentage of truck traffic versus a higher volume of truck traffic, and it also offers a redundant route. So in terms of if we have a major flooding event or a major natural disaster, is there an alternate route that we can use to get to where we need to be?
Well, yeah, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but where that exits Harris County, for example, once you get on that road, no truck could possibly go on that unless it's a pickup with four-wheel drive. I mean, that's the road that kind of goes up through Plum Grove and that whole area. Anyway.
That truck, the truck count on that road is 341.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I said the truck count on that road right now is 340 from the data we have. And they probably will count very low in terms of scoring since we have done with all the scoring. This is basically a list of all the projects that are, I guess, expansion projects that are on the tip or on the UTP. It's not necessarily a final project on the CUFC list. It's there because it's on the tip, but it will probably get dropped off if the truck count since the truck count is so low.
Now I'm going to show Bill how to lower the hand.
Okay, so we'll move on to try and begin, we'll move on to next steps. Just to begin to wrap this up. And I want to thank everyone for the discussion on this. So go ahead, Keith.
Okay, on next steps, the slide is up. We're going to get all the recommendations in, will allow us to get a complete list of the critical urban freight corridors. But we want to get everybody's feedback. We do appreciate you attending, as Veronica said. We want to look at those key issues and needs by all the corridors and all the issues, and you know, we've added safety to the criteria as well. And identify ITS and TSMO solutions, and then look at those as to how they're going to be potentially developed over the short, mid, and long term, and what they mean in the way of projects and programs. So a lot of things there, but we know everything can't be done at once, and they have to be segregated out by the type, and you know, so that we can justify the recommendations, and then ultimately they have to be tied to funding and financing options. What do we have on the next slide? Schedule. It's almost July, not quite, but close to June. And we are pretty much on schedule. And you can see the other tasks that we will finish the existing conditions, and then we're going to be starting the recommendations here in another month. And on to the next slide. Again, the web page link is there. We're trying to keep that current, and
Yes.
other information that you'll find on there. Okay.
So everything that you've seen today in today's meeting is available through the H-GAC Engage website. You'll be able to review the previous meetings if you wanted to go back and hear what other people have said about what has happened. You'll get meeting updates for the upcoming public meeting. Any of the materials presentations will also be available. The links to each of the data tools that you have seen used today will also be available there, as well as the Regional Goods Movement Plan Storyboard, which gives you roughly 28 maps of different types of different ways to look at freight moving through the region. So if I could encourage you to use anything to become more knowledgeable about what we're talking about, and provide us with feedback, is to go to the engage.h-gac.com/regional goods movement, and you have access to each one of the tools that you've seen today, as well as a multitude of maps. It'll take a couple of days, the end of the week, to get the rest of this meeting onto that page, but you'll be able to touch and play with it by Friday. But all of the data tools are already at your disposal.
So there's a project timeline, but my question is about the critical urban freight corridors. Is there a separate deadline for that? What is that deadline?
Yes, there's a separate deadline for the critical urban freight corridor. So we'll be closing out most of analysis over the next week or so. We plan to take it to TAC and TPC by the next TAC for July and TPC, and it'll be due to TxDOT in early August.
So as a group, are we going to have another meeting before it goes to the TAC?
So here, I know that, so we have about 22 miles, but after the initial sort of analysis, we brought it down to about 150, 120 miles. Our goal is to send something to Veronica as a spreadsheet and a map that goes along with it. So it gets circulated among all the stakeholders. I know you brought up the same point, that, folks have the same concern. You get to look at that list, and we are trying to get you a primary list, not necessarily based on our judgment alone. It's based on the quantitative scoring and everything. But our goal is to look through the list to see, hey, does this make sense or does not? And we'll get you a primary list and a secondary list, and say, hey, these are probably projects which might jump into that list at the end, but it's into those two lists along with the map. So you get to decide, hey, we agree with this or we don't, or maybe we should go up. So you have about a week or 10 days to come back before you finalize it. That's the plan.
Again, my name is Veronica Green. With any additional questions, you can always contact me, veronica.green@h-gac.com. And my support on this is ally.isbell@h-gac.com. And with that, we can conclude, and I thank everybody for their input. Please feel free to contact me at any time.
You guys sent out recommended, suggested, or whatever you want to call it. It would be good to have that